I've wanted to get back into doing tool reviews for some time now, and I decided to start with this tool. This is the WEN Oscillating Belt and Spindle Sander model 6524 that came to me in January, and I used it here and there, but I use it a lot more in the past couple of weeks in making a couple of picture frames, rehabbing some old boxes, basically using it for the edge sanding feature. And so I think I can do a fairly thorough review. So what I'm going to do is first talk about the specs of the sander. Then I will compare those specs to perhaps the most popular oscillating belt spindle sander on the market made by Rigid. And after that, I will do a demonstration in belt mode. I'll flip it over to spindle mode, and then I will go through my likes and dislikes to wrap up the video. So jumping right in. So I printed off the specs for both the WEN and the Rigid oscillating belt spindle sander. I don't know exactly what the model number is. Actually, you can see it in the corner there. EB4424. Anyway, if you've been in a Home Depot, you've seen it. It's orange, and I would venture to say this is probably the most popular belt spindle sander on the market. I'm going to just go through some of the specs that I think are important. So this is not going to be a point-by-point comparison of the two. Just the specs I think are probably going to help inform your decision. So starting with power, they are both 120 volt tools. The WEN amps up to 3.5, whereas the Rigid goes up to 4.6, so the Rigid has it beat there. They both use a 1/2 horsepower motor. I think one of the main differences really comes in the size. The Rigid has a slightly larger footprint. Depth by height by width, you're talking 19 1/4, 23 1/2, and 19. Whereas the WEN depth, height, width is essentially anywhere from 1 to 5 inches shorter in each dimension. So 16 1/2 as opposed to 19 1/4, 18 height as opposed to 23, and 18.5 width as opposed to 19. I feel the WEN is not undersized, even though it's a smaller footprint. I did a couple of very large picture frames, and the table was more than enough to accommodate my needs. The larger footprint of the Rigid means, not surprisingly, that it weighs more. It weighs about 40 pounds as opposed to the WEN's 27. Aside from availability, I found this was actually just available from a few reputable places, Home Depot being one of them, whereas the WEN you could buy at Home Depot. It's available on Amazon and also through wen.com. Perhaps the biggest difference between the two is the price. The cheapest price for the Rigid that I could find was $270. That's at Home Depot. The other options online were quite higher. The WEN, however, sells for $215 at Home Depot, so you're talking about almost $60 cheaper, just the same store. It gets even cheaper when you buy on Amazon, $209, and through wen.com it's down to $196. I bought mine for about that. I think it was in the $180 to $190 price range. I think I had a coupon or a gift card that I used. But I'm not really sure what justifies the extra $70 or so from the Rigid to the WEN. If it's just the little more increase in power, maybe the larger footprint, perhaps, but that seems to be a substantial difference for not that much power-related difference and really not that much size-related difference. So not only is this tool cheaper than the Rigid, it's also a better fit for my needs. Whatever sander I was going to buy was going to sit in this spot right here. This is my mobile dust collection cart. I wheel it around the shop to vacuum around here and there, and I don't have any counter space to put a tool like a sander, so this is really all that I had. Had I gone with the rigid, the larger footprint would have meant it would have stuck out a lot further if it would have even balanced on that small space at all. And it would have been also bigger in the side directions as well. But the biggest thing for me was the dust collection port. The rigid's dust collection port is on the back. And that might not be a problem if you have a lot of space behind your tool, but I don't here. It's butting up right against the fan. So to have the dust port on the side is huge for me because I can just attach my hose. I don't even have a proper fitting at the moment. This is just a 2.5-inch hose attached on, I don't even know what size that dust port is, but I just kind of hook it on there. And even with an improper fitting, it still does a tremendous job at capturing dust along with the box fan. So whenever I need to use the sander, my dust collection's already here. I flip the switch, that activates the dust collection, activates the fan, and as a result, I'm really only left with just a little bit of dust. This is the leftover dust from about 5 to 10 minutes of really aggressive sanding I did today. If you've used a belt sander before, you know that it shoots dust everywhere, and you really don't even see too much on the table below it. It either got sucked up by the vacuum through the spot here, this little space here, or it got sucked into the filter on the fan. There's also a spot for everything, and I do mean everything. Everything that comes with this tool has a home here. Each of the spindle sanders has a home. Each of the washers you use with the various spindle sanders has a home. Each of the throat plates you use with the spindles has a home. There's 2 more on the other side. A little guard that sits up here, including the bolt and wing nut and nut that you use to attach. They're all in their proper place because everything has a little slot. And I think that's just amazing. I'm the type that will absolutely lose something if there's not a home for it. So everything is where it's supposed to be. The table itself is adjustable. If you come around to this side, you can see that there are several detents here. It's sitting at 90 right now. It can also be adjusted 15, or sitting at 0, I should say. You can adjust it to 15 degrees, 22.5, 30, and then 45, and each is notched at a detent. So all you really need to do is loosen up the knobs on either side. You push down, and you rotate. And I'm going to put it back in the 90 and see how well it registers. So what I've got is my most trusty machinist square. And just with it detented in at 90, not tightening down the bolts or anything, I have it looking very good. So that looks pretty much like 90. It also can adjust down to 45. I don't have a 45-degree square, but I'll just adjust it down just to show you what it looks like. Again, push a little tab down. Difficult to do one-handed. And there you go. It's at 45. And you tighten down the knobs, and you're good to go. Again, I've not used it. I don't know how often you would need to do that, but in case you need it, it's there. And I'm also not sure how often you'd need a 30-degree or 22.5-degree, maybe for trim work. But again, if you do, it's there. So let me turn this on just so you can see how loud it gets. I've unplugged my dust collection. I've unplugged my fan, so all you're going to hear is the tool itself. It's a little bit loud. I would put that as it's hard to have a conversation with someone 6 feet away from you with this going on level of loud. I don't have a decibel meter, so I can't really measure it, but it's not whisper quiet. It comes with 80 grit sanders, 80 grit paper on all the spindle sanders and on the belt. The paper kind of wears out. I've actually flipped this over once already, and it might just be me, but it does seem to wear out a little bit prematurely. Again, no basis for comparison, but it's not lasting as long as I would have hoped. So let me switch it to spindle sander for you. See a little knob here. There's a lock and unlock, kind of hard to see, but there's an unlock and a lock button. So you want to turn it to unlock. Flip this little knob. And there's a washer and the knob, and you just take all of that out. And then you grab the throat plate from the back, you just drop that in. It just kind of sits there, and you select whichever you're going to use. I'm going to use this particular one. I don't really know which one that is, but I think it goes with this washer. So you drop it on. Put on the washer. You take the little nut here.
And if it will twist on.
You twist it on. Take the wrench. Give it a nice tightening. And you're good to go. One thing I didn't do was use a throat plate. This is where you would put them, so I'll just take this one right here, drop it on. Not necessary, nice to have, but not necessary unless you're doing some smaller things that might fall into here unless you have a throat plate. I actually prefer no throat plate because I think it gets more vacuum action here from the dust collection, the more space there is for air and dust to travel in. So now the reverse. Pop out the throat plate, goes back into its home. It's kind of difficult to do one-handed, but I will try.
There we go. All right, so
The spindle nut goes to its home. Washer, same. Pop off the spindle. Now reattaching the belt sander. Just drop it on here. There's a little, you can see a gray tab there that fits into this little white slot here. That's how you know everything is aligned properly. There we go. There. Drop it on. Washer. Knob. Tightened. Good to go. When I took this off, I actually detensioned the belt. You don't need to do that in order to take it on and off. You can just unlock this, pop it off, and you're good to go. So likes and dislikes. I'll do the dislikes first. There's really only one. It is that it's a little bit louder than I had hoped. I thought more about my comment about the sandpaper not being very strong and being prone to wearing out quickly. I'm going to take that back. I really have no idea how it stacks against others, so I'm not going to say that. But it is louder than I would have hoped. Not really a deal breaker, and again, not something that requires hearing protection if you're going to just be doing 30 seconds of sanding, but something to be aware of. As far as the likes, there are a lot of them. It's extremely affordable, certainly when compared to others. It has a much smaller footprint than some others I've seen, which allows you to put it in many more spaces. I do like the adjustability of the table and the fact that it's detented, so it's going to lock in exactly where it should be. There's a spot for everything, and I really do enjoy this side dust port. I know it sounds like such a stupid thing to geek out over, but that is kind of what sold me on this sander, because I knew where it was going to go. I knew how I was going to use it. And now whenever I want to use it, I hook up the vacuum to the side and I go and do my sanding. If you are going to get this type of sander and you have space behind it to put a box fan with a filter, then that's going to really cut down on the amount of dust. I capture the majority of dust that comes off this thing through the vacuum and through the fan. And you don't need to necessarily have a setup like this to do that as well. If you have space behind it to put a fan and you have something hooked up to the vacuum, this is going to capture a ton of dust. So overall, I really am happy with this purchase. It is something that I have used a lot already. It's something I'm going to use a lot more. I probably will mostly use it with the belt sanding feature, but it's nice to know the spindle is there as well for curves should that need a rise. But overall, very pleased, very happy, and I think it's definitely worth the money.